say you wanna watch a drama. You say you wanna watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama, or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler, so you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because it is our United Kingdom. You were expecting me to say more, weren't ya? Also, shout out to our listeners across the pond. I'm the blogger in question and the self-styled Chief Couch Potato. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, via Google Play and Spotify to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including but not limited to Fuller House, Jane the Virgin, Supernatural, Orange is the New Black, Gotham, the Marvel shows on Netflix, Stranger Things, The Good Place, and Game of Thrones. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for American Horror Story, Grace and Frankie, Altered Carbon, Doctor Who, Schitt's Creek, Westworld, Riverdale. The DCTU series panel will catch up on the first two seasons of Black Lightning, and the Star Trek 50 Plus series will talk Season 2 of The Next Generation. We'll be launching new panels covering Charmed, Outlander, the Breaking Bad universe, This Is Us, and the Orville. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll put out some musical stops for our crazy ex-girlfriend. We'll revisit one of the all-time and most-watched classic sitcoms, MASH. We'll consider the moral implications and quick cancellation of Dollhouse, and we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, game stores, and more. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in these quarantine times. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Podcasts and Spotify. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback. Just have the decency to share it with us and our Privy Council, and not head straight to the tabloids about it. Sheesh. Today, we're back around the water cooler to discuss Season 3 of Netflix streaming original The Crown. If you are not already aware, and if you've listened to the first two episodes in this panel series, you should know that from time to time, your chief couch potato and main moderator, that's me, needs a break, particularly when I think others are more passionate about the show we're discussing in the moment. Case in point, today's episode, which I'm not here to moderate, rather frequent panelist Krista returns to the moderating microphone once again for this series, while yours truly settles into the discussion as a participating panelist. Krista and I are further joined by returning CPU Royals Spencer, Samantha, and Kristen T, as well as a brand new voice for this third season talk. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back Krista to the moderating microphone. Take it away, Krista.
Thank you, Kylie. So everyone, welcome to Season 3 of The Crown, the Netflix series created by Peter Morgan. This is a brand new cast, as it's an anthology series that uses different actors as the real people, i.e. Queen Elizabeth and her family, age. We are back around the tea cart today, and at this time, I would like the panel to introduce themselves and rate their interest in the show. Are you watching because you love it and what it will continue to bring for future generations, like Prince Philip? Are you watching because it's a bit of fun, but it makes you really sad sometimes, and maybe a gin pick-me-up will help, like Princess Margaret? Do you always hope for more and want it to be whatever it is, like Prince Charles? Are you watching because duty calls and duty is everything, like Queen Elizabeth? Or, like her aunt, are you just in it for a bit of fun and also enjoy stirring the pot, like Princess Anne? Well, let me know. Who wants to go first?
I'm Spencer. I'm on
Hi, Spencer.
podcast at this point. And I would say in this, I am Prince Philip. I really enjoy the show. I love the historical aspect, although somewhat dramatized. And yeah, this is a really great show.
Welcome back,
Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Samantha.
Hi, Samantha.
Hey, Samantha.
And this season, I am a combination of Queen Elizabeth and her sister, Princess Margaret. I found this season to be much sadder than past, and depending on the episode, how I felt about the show in general.
Welcome back,
Well,
Samantha.
excited to hear more about that as we continue along.
Hello, fellow couch potato. I'm honored to be an honorary potato today. not on my couch.
You don't have to be just honorary.
Can I be like a constant couch potato?
You can if you want.
I do. I want to be. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be here. And just to annoy the heck out of Spencer, I'm going to talk like this throughout the whole show today.
All right. Well, that was fun. See you all next time.
No, I will not do that. But as far as where I would classify myself, I'm so pleased to get to talk about this show. I am definitely in the Prince Philip camp. I'm watching because I unabashedly don't just love, I adore this show. And maybe we'll have a chance to talk going forward about how surprised I was at that, because I went into this kind of skeptical. I'm not a huge historical drama person as a general rule, but this is a show I cannot wait for the next episode to come out, or the next season. I hope we don't have to wait as long as we did for this one.
Welcome to CPU, Todd. Not an honorary, constant couch potato is fine.
Excellent. When do I get my badge?
When we
I'm
get the
still
budget
waiting.
for badges.
It comes from China, though, so.
Spencer.
I'm Kristen,
Hi,
sometimes
Kristen.
known as Kristen T on other panels like Sherlock and Downton Abbey.
That's a really
And
long name for me to repeat, so I'm just going to say hi, Kristen T.
Okay. Hi. I am definitely, especially with this series, I am definitely a Prince Philip. I found this series to be engaging in ways that the first two series weren't, although I absolutely love them. I love historical dramas, and I love the characters, and I love the cast of the first two series. I was a little concerned going in for this one, but it turns out that I'm Prince Philip all the way.
Welcome
I
back,
should
Kristen.
put a disclaimer in here, shouldn't I, Kylie?
It is time for this disclaimer, yes.
Yes, I am very lucky to be married to Kristen T. She is my Wallace Simpson.
Hey!
Not in a bad way, it's the American English thing. American English thing, that's all.
He just made himself an abdicated king. I don't know how I feel about that.
I would abdicate being king for you.
Aww. Way to turn it around.
Okay, there we go. We found it.
Welcome back, Kristen T.
Yes, welcome.
My name is Kylie, as I've mentioned at the top. And
Hi, Kylie.
Hi. I do not remember what I was last time, but I will, based on the scale that you kind of discussed, I think I will be Princess Margaret. I think it's a bit of fun, but it is really sad sometimes. However, I agree with Kristen and her description that I was at first a little bit leery, not too leery, because I actually love Olivia Colman a lot. She's in a lot of different things that I've watched, and I enjoy her quite a bit, so I was not worried about her. Was worried about some of the other cast members, and some of them allayed those worries and some of them didn't for me, and so I might be, I don't know, I might be the party pooper again, we'll see. But I still enjoyed this series quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Welcome, Kylie, to your own podcast.
Thank you, Krista.
Actually, this time I'm Krista and I'm last.
Hi, Krista, and you're last.
And I am mostly Princess Margaret, but a little bit of Philip also. I'm overjoyed to watch it. I, like Kylie, I love Olivia Colman. I think she's amazing and wonderful, and I will truly watch her in anything. She's one of those actors I will follow. So that's not something I was even a little concerned about. And I really think the casting was pretty spot on in a lot of ways. It was sad. There were a few episodes in the middle there that really dragged for me, that made the rewatch a little tough, just because of the plot was slow. But for the most part, I loved it also. So let's talk about those new actors. What did we think? Who did we like? Who didn't we like?
Well, I was most excited about Tobias Menzies going into it because I've watched him on many shows and he's just a doll and an awesome actor. So, and I think for the most part, he lived up to it for me.
If I can chime in on that, Samantha, I couldn't agree with you more. He was honestly the highlight of this season for me in many ways, not the least of which I'm sure we'll talk about. He was the heart of, and I mean that literally and figuratively in many ways, of my favorite episode of this season. So he just blew me away because as much as I like Matt Smith.
Not to interrupt, just for our listeners, he plays Prince Philip.
Yes.
Tobias Menzies does.
Yes.
So in case anyone's confused.
Right. Yeah. And as much as I like Matt Smith in seasons 1 and 2, and I like him as an actor, he was one of my least favorite things maybe about the first 2 seasons. And by least favorite, I mean, I loved him just a little less than everything else that I loved about the first 2 seasons. So I think this is a step up for that character. And he just had so much more to do on a human level, I think, in this season. And then I liked that very much.
No, it's true. He brought a lot of charm to Philip that makes a lot more sense in what we know about Philip historically that we were never, ever getting with Matt Smith.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I could not agree more. It seemed like Matt Smith's only move as Philip was to look downwards towards the floor as he was speaking and then raise his eyes. And it started to really bug me after 2 or 3 episodes. Tobias is playing the character in full, whereas I felt like Matt Smith was playing a shadow of a caricature of Prince Philip. Not that I didn't enjoy the storylines and everything, but every time we watched it in seasons 1 and 2, I always remarked to Kristen how Matt Smith was bugging me, and I did not have a single problem with Tobias playing Philip at all.
Yeah, he had so much more depth.
He did. He had a lot more depth. Seemed like Matt Smith picked up on the broodiness, and that was about it.
He was a brooder.
Yeah, he was a bit broody, but I really enjoyed the Tobias this season as well because I felt like the layers were there, and it was a character I wanted to know more about, where I hadn't as much with Philip earlier on.
And I do feel like a good chunk of that also is in the focus of the writing this season of that character. He had a lot less caricature-ish aspects to play. There was more depth to the feelings that you could tell he was having of being in the shadow of, Queen Elizabeth and what all of that entailed to him and what he had sacrificed in order to be this. I'm sure we'll get into more detail about that as we go forward. And if I can say too, for me going into this season, partially because we had to wait so long to get it, which was agonizing. Also because I loved the cast from the first 2 seasons so very much. I just thought all across the board the casting was wonderful, not the least of which my favorite from season 1 as far as the main characters was Princess Margaret. Vanessa Kirby was an absolute revelation in that role, and I'm sure we'll talk about the comparisons between her and Helena Bonham Carter as we go forward. But knowing we were getting a whole new cast and I had fallen so deeply in love with all of these actors playing these characters, I was skeptical. I was sitting there with my arms folded, just saying, all right. But I went into it knowing, you know what, I will give this crew, this team, every bit of a chance because they have not steered me wrong in a single episode yet. They must have a good reason for doing that. And I kid you not, within 2 minutes of episode 1, this was the new queen, and I was fine with it. I thought she was amazing.
As soon as he said, "Oh, I'm an old bat," the old bat thing with the dogs, it really kind of, they're like, "Oh, okay, we're fine now."
It was a beautifully done transition between Claire Foy and Olivia Colman with the whole stamp thing, and it worked so well. I was worried about specifically Claire Foy going to Olivia Colman because, everything I'd seen them in previously is so completely different. They're almost polar opposites. But Olivia Colman absolutely nails it. The only problem I had with her sometimes, her particular smile didn't speak Queen Elizabeth to me. But beyond that, she was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a little too dour at times, the smile?
It was a little too, oh, look, there's Olivia Colman smiling. It almost broke character a little bit for me. But overall, was able to look past that because of how strong a job she was doing with the attitude, the persona, and just the whole regal aspect. You know, she presented herself very much in the way the Queen that I saw growing up. And this is the time period that I grew up seeing the Queen and having all these events happen in my lifetime. And obviously I had, being in England at the time, had a close association to those things.
Yeah, if you recall from the previous episodes, I spent a lot of time talking about Claire Foy and Matt Smith particularly. Big fan of Doctor Who, love Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor. I really struggled with him as Prince Philip. He took me out of it more than he actually connected with me, especially because I'll remind the listener and the panel that my 4th grade biographical report was on Prince Philip. So
oh, wow.
I have a lot of at least foundational knowledge of the House of Windsor, at least up until a point. And so Matt Smith's Prince Philip really took me out of it. Tobias Menzies' Prince Philip is excellent. Like, he is Prince Philip in many, many ways, not only in the depths of the character and the writing that he's portraying, but there's reverberations and echoes of the real man in what he's doing. And also Olivia Colman, I had absolutely zero worry that she was going to pull it off. She is so phenomenal. And everything I've seen her in. And yeah, she does have certain Olivia Colman-esque qualities, I guess, but to me, my opinion, she was much more the Queen than Claire Foy was. Claire Foy did a great job, but to me, she was playing the character. Olivia Colman, for me, almost embodied QE2. And
I agree.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because the time period and the history that this season is starting to cover is more in line with what I remember from growing up and is closer to my own kind of timestamp in history than the first 2 seasons. But I definitely bought into the look of her even more. And just the way they cleverly transitioned it was very sharp. But I
would also suggest that Olivia Colman had a lot more to look at, to go on, to build her character from, whereas Claire Foy had very much less as far as TV, even, you know, she basically would have to go off the radio and pictures a lot more than Olivia Colman would have been able to.
But to Olivia's credit, though, she's actually given interviews where she sat down with Claire Foy. They actually did some preliminary table reads before Olivia transitioned into the character.
Brilliant.
So she could adopt Claire's initial mannerisms, gestures, ways of carrying herself, and then she just kind of took it forward from there.
And I think that
you
played.
Saw that.
Yeah, that totally played. That was the same character. And that's so hard when you recast anything. I mean, the guts of recasting this entire show and moving it forward so many years and not being afraid of alienating and feeling like these are different versions of that character and not that same character years later. And I think they nailed it with very few exceptions. And what I love about, what I also think is possible too, of why maybe we feel that Olivia Colman's portrayal maybe felt even more like the Queen, is maybe because I think with Peter Morgan, the creator of the show and the writer of, if I'm not mistaken, all of the episodes.
He had a co-writer on one of them.
Extraordinary writer. He's my second favorite, I think my second favorite writer in film today, worldwide, just behind Aaron Sorkin. And he's closer in age now to these characters. And I felt like there was an awful lot of Peter Morgan working through some things that was coming out, especially through Prince Philip's character through this season. But I think maybe his voice for these characters as they age, like a fine wine, is only going to get better and better with every age advance that they do through this series.
Do we think that, given how Prince Philip was treated in the first 2 seasons, and unfairly and historically inaccurate, that some of the reason Philip has so much screen time this season is kind of a response to that?
It's an interesting point. That certainly could be, or it certainly could be in conjunction with, you know, Peter Morgan looking back on that season and going, you know, I want to tell more of his story and do it more in depth than we had the opportunity to do in that first season. They touched on some things that they expanded on beautifully here, I think.
So, go ahead.
Well, I actually was going to bring up, we didn't really compare Helena and Vanessa Kirby.
I was just going to...
Okay.
That's what I was about to say.
Hey, great minds. Yeah, great couch potatoes think alike.
We unite.
If I can jump in on that first just for a moment, only because I have to admit, full disclosure, I have a mad crush on Vanessa Kirby. I do. I have to admit that. And, she is a very beautiful woman. Okay, absolutely. But that's not where her beauty comes from. Everything that she is about. She has an energy. She is a star. Vanessa Kirby is an absolute movie star because it all comes from inside her. Everything I've seen her in, including Mission Impossible, when you can be next to Tom Cruise, like him or not, the guy has incredible star charisma power. And every moment she's on screen, you're watching her energy. And that, I think, it made it really hard for Helena Bonham Carter, who I adore and think is an amazing actress. It made it really hard for me in this to not compare the two of them. That was the one character, her and Prince Philip, that I didn't feel they were the same human being.
She was the one that I struggled with the most.
You think Prince Philip was the same human being?
I mean, it felt the most like two different actors doing their take on the same character, whereas Olivia Colman and Claire Foy felt like they were the same person playing the same person. You know what I mean? It just felt very different to me.
I don't know, too, for me, if how much of that was how much of Helena Bonham Carter I'm familiar with in other things. I wasn't as familiar with Olivia Colman as the rest of you. As some people might know, I don't watch a ton of TV. So she was new for me. And watching Claire Foy, I had thought in the first two series, I felt like watching her was a masterclass in acting. I learned a lot from her as a performer as well as the character. And that was kind of my concern going into the next series is, oh my goodness, I'm going to miss her and miss watching her. But within a few minutes, Olivia Colman, I was like, yep, this is going to be just fine. But I would agree with Todd that Helena Bonham Carter, as amazingly talented as she was, she did not seem like a continuation of the Margaret from the first two series. It seemed like quite a leap.
I totally disagree.
Wait a second. But my problem with that is that I couldn't connect or disconnect my brain from the fact that she was Helena Bonham Carter.
Me
like
too.
I never saw her as Princess Margaret. I just saw her.
I think I'm with you there, Samantha. I think for sure.
Yeah, massively difficult time suspending disbelief for her. And because, now part of it I think is, she's portraying the part of Princess Margaret's life where everything starts to go to hell in a handbasket real quick. So there's going to feel a little bit, that difference is going to be felt a little bit more strongly. But it was really, really hard for me to turn off my brain with her because if you're talking about distinctive Olivia Colman qualities, Helena Bonham Carter has distinctive qualities that she brings to every role.
Absolutely.
She's one of those actors that can be themselves on screen no matter what character they play. Sean Connery was very much the same when he was on the screen. Didn't matter what he was doing, he was always Sean Connery, and it worked. The thing with this particular role, yes, it felt very much like two different characters, but when you look at Princess Margaret's life and this particular portion of her life, she was kind of two very different characters through that part that was played early on and through the part now that we get. She was always a wild child, but she really went off the rails and got a lot darker and meaner. And so, yes, there was definitely a distinct disconnect between what we saw in seasons 1 and 2 and what we saw now. But in some ways, that actually really reflects how she was in real life.
Agreed.
And what was intriguing too? Oh, go ahead.
She's no longer the ingenue. She's a middle-aged woman facing the fact that her husband's cheating on her, and she is never going to get the attention ever that she wants.
Completely agree.
I don't know. I mean, I know it's Helena Bonham Carter, but I didn't get stuck on that. But there was enough there, and it's still Margaret, and I totally bought it.
I just wanted to say that I agree, and that's why I led off with the hell in the handbasket part. It's a little bit more than that, though. And the comparison would be the Claire to Olivia trajectory versus the Vanessa to Helena trajectory. Claire and Olivia seemed to have a simpatico where you felt like Olivia took what Claire did and then went in her own direction this way. There didn't seem to feel any kind of connection between Vanessa's portrayal and Helena's portrayal that could have easily snapped with the evolution of Princess Margaret's lifetime. That's what was so concerning for me, and that's why I was so distracted by the fact that she was Helena Bonham Carter.
And what's interesting is Helena Bonham Carter has such certainly in past roles she's played, she has such an energy to her that I was kind of surprised in the main episode for her character in this season, where we really do get to learn a lot about what she's going through. I expected a little more of that Vanessa Kirby energy on a negative side.
Me too.
To come through with her, and I was waiting, and I'm like, oh my gosh, here we're gonna get full Helena here, man. And it's going to work because I think it'll tie back to the energy Vanessa Kirby brought on the other side in the first 2 seasons, but it didn't quite get to that level. And I'm not necessarily saying that was a bad thing. It surprised me and maybe pulled me a little bit out of it because I was kind of waiting for that.
Exactly.
Because it almost felt like she was putting on a show, where the younger Margaret was putting on a show, but it felt very natural and just an extension of her personality, where this felt very like in private she's one person, in public she's another, and then she's trying to sell people on her.
She has to try now.
And there were also moments where I couldn't help but see Bellatrix Lestrange.
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, really. That's...
Wait, what is that?
One of
Harry
Bellatrix
Potter.
Lestrange is the character she played in Harry Potter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there were moments and flashes where you kind of felt like you were watching. And that is one of the perils of an actor who very much goes on screen as themselves and plays a role and gives it a passion, but it always reflects through everything they've done.
But I did think it was I was just very thrilled to see Helena Bonham Carter not being directed by Tim Burton so that she could be something different than she's been in so many films. I just want the same thing to happen to Johnny Depp. That's a whole nother story. I just want Johnny Depp to never work with Tim Burton again so he can become an actor again.
That might be the only work he can get nowadays.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else watched the Graham Norton show clip about their process, about how
they were delightful. Like, as two human beings together, oh my gosh, the most delightful ever.
Truly. And Helena read and watched videos. And she even went to
a psychic
to try to like speak to Princess Margaret. And apparently that's how she got the cigarette thing. But Olivia Colman allegedly did nothing. Or like she did what she was told, and she did what Claire Foy did, and then that's it.
Yes, the question that was posed to her by Graham was, so did you research anything? She's like, no.
Which is an interesting, from an acting standpoint, it's an interesting question to pose, and there's no right or wrong answer, it's I think can be the difference between feeling like, boy, if I do too much research in that area, what exactly was she like and what are the mannerisms? Is it going to become an impersonation or something of that character rather than doing my version of what Queen Elizabeth is? And boy, it worked. It worked for what Claire Foy and what Olivia Colman did. So I can't fault their approach at all. And it also did work very well for Princess Margaret, for what Helena Bonham Carter did, because it did feel a little less like some other Helena Bonham Carter roles that I've seen where it really felt rooted in her more than in the character.
Should be noted that Olivia told Helena she didn't believe her when she talked to the psychic. Do you believe that I spoke to Princess Margaret? She also said, no, I don't, but that's okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Like, whatever works for you.
Right.
It's what you believe that matters.
Really. So let's move on a little bit. What were some bright spots from season 3?
So my favorite relationship that evolved throughout the season was the one between Elizabeth and Prime Minister Wilson, and how awkward it is from the outset and how they develop such a strong friendship and almost mentorship of sorts as the season progressed. And that's one of the parts that was so sad. There were so many sad moments throughout the season. Yeah. But to me, the saddest of them all was when his health was failing near the end of the season.
Yeah, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
I loved him so much. I'm so glad you brought that up. My favorite new addition. And when you're following John Lithgow as Churchill, so iconic, so, and such an interesting interpretation of that character at that time. And I don't know, I just thought this was such a wonderful take on that character. And what could have very easily become a caricature felt rooted in reality of a human being every single moment he was on screen. I adored it.
I fast forwarded to the part where he did the limericks. Okay, we've gone this far. You can do this. You can tell me what the ridiculous thing Margaret did is.
Yep.
I also very much enjoyed the farewell to Winston Churchill. I thought it was a very classy way of passing the torch between prime ministers. I will say I did enjoy John Lithgow's performance of Churchill throughout this until I saw Gary Oldman's portrayal of Churchill in The Longest
Sure.
Day.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't see John Lithgow as Churchill anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's another one of those examples of, I think, where, the makeup was so much stronger in Darkest Hour to make him look so much like him. Whereas John Lithgow was really relying on, not to say that Gary Oldman didn't do an amazing job as well, but I agree. I think John Lithgow was amazing. And then it was taken up even another notch. What a great Churchill year or two we've had.
Yes, agreed. It was interesting to see speaking about Churchill and about Wilson as well, because Peter Morgan also wrote the play The Audience, which we had a chance to see. And that play is not in chronological order. You see Queen Elizabeth's life, but it jumps around from between ages, between eras, and you see Wilson as a kind of a common theme through that coming back. So it was interesting to see Peter Morgan's treatment of the relationship on screen and kind of how it compared to what we saw in the play. It very much made it seem like he was endeared to her very much, like they had a relationship that was closer than many of the prime ministers through their weekly audiences and things like that. Churchill and Wilson were the ones that stood out in both, and that was neat to see.
Neat. Yeah.
I particularly enjoyed the plotting of the first episode, of the reveal of the spy, just the whole red herring of it. And I remember the first time I watched it being like, I mean, of course you'd have no idea, but I thought it was interesting and clever. And then if you go and read more about it, it's basically accurate, which is weird.
Yes, this season definitely, compared to the last two, seemed to me to start out more documentary-like, where they were giving very specific dates and zeroing in on specific events and doing the bit of a recap before the credits at the end of what happened. So it took me a bit longer with this season to get more into the narrative storytelling side of it and disconnect from it as, okay, this is a TV show versus a documentary.
Don't worry, they still got loosey-goosey with the facts.
Well, of course,
when they were focusing on relationships, they're like, we're going to put an entire 8 years into one episode.
I was a little bit different as far as engagement with the plot points. There was a lot of history in this series that I was not familiar with going in, and I found that extremely engaging. Aberfan episode, for one.
That's one of my favorites.
No idea. I had no idea.
No idea anything like that.
I didn't either.
Right.
No idea at all.
And it was so interesting to visualize it and then be able to read up a little bit more on it. This series in general was hard for me to stop with one episode. And I always tell Spencer, we have to ration the Crown, right? Because there are only 10.
Very
and then
true.
it'll be a long time. So I would say we have to only watch one at a time. But this was the hardest one for me to do. And particularly after that episode, I was hooked.
And that's a testament, I think, very much to Peter Morgan as a writer. He's just extraordinary at pacing. He's extraordinary at taking characters who, in many ways, are untouchable, that are many ways, they're a whole nother level of human being in the way that they are in society, and making you focus on the humanity of them, which is why, for me, hands down, my favorite episode of all 3 seasons happened in this season. Took me completely by surprise. I am not ashamed to say I sobbed for a half an hour after episode 7, Moondust. That episode tore me up watching Prince Philip realize that meeting your heroes can be so disappointing. And seeing in that actor, in Tobias, in the portrayal of that character, the child of Prince Philip coming out in this man. Everything about that episode and his relationship with his mother and everything that was happening there, it got done. And I just had to turn the TV off and just let all of these feelings just pour through. It is an hour of perfect television for me. It was amazing.
I would say
I thought a masterclass in acting would be Tobias Menzies in that particular episode. And just to watch even all the mirrors and echoes throughout the entire episode with Anne, with the children, it was just really, really well constructed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my two favorite episodes in this season were Aberfan, or however you say it, and Moondust. And for me, I think it's the juxtaposition of showing the vulnerabilities in each of these two figures. You get the Queen's vulnerability and sort of the reframing of the monarchy, really, with that incident. And then in Prince Philip, exactly what Todd said. Sort of, he's a larger-than-life figure talking to other larger-than-life figures that he idolizes. And I love the reciprocity in the scene where they meet with him at the palace, and he's getting more and more disappointed while they're getting more and more excited about the fact that they're in Buckingham Palace. I thought both of those episodes were brilliantly written, brilliantly directed, brilliantly paced, and brilliantly performed.
And one of the components that I think made his disappointment build more is how focused those three guys were on sort of the physical things that he kind of takes as a throwaway of sorts, of the palaces and the physicality of the things. And he's like, this doesn't matter. The things around here don't matter. And you can just see that in his eyes and in his face.
It's a classic case of the grass is greener.
Yeah. And what we take for granted every day and what we hold up to a higher level of, and the fact that, him being a pilot and not being able to continue to pursue that, and the ultimate dream of so many pilots during that era was to be a part of the missions to space, and that was something he knew he would never get to do, despite all of the power and or at least perceived power that he has. That's something he could never do.
How did we feel about the Prince Charles?
I was just thinking about that episode, and I said I was not even going to try to say the name of it, but
I know
it's episode 6. Was it Kylie?
I said I can't speak Celtic or Welsh or whatever we're calling the language.
I said Simru.
Definitely Welsh. Surprisingly, that is one of the episodes that stuck with me for a long time after watching. I thought, at first I was heartbroken for Charles. At the beginning, Krista in her notes said, I cannot believe I feel badly for Prince Charles. And that episode, I really did. The fact that he was torn out of Cambridge, he was supposed to be in a play.
He was Richard II.
I know. I was just like, and after seeing it, I don't remember what series it was in when he went off to the boarding school that his father had gone to and had such a horrible experience.
That was the end of season 1.
Season 1. Thinking, he cannot catch a break. He can't.
Right.
And then just, I don't know, watching
him. It was called Patter Families. I don't remember which season it is.
Yeah, I don't remember where it was either, but I was really enthralled by that storyline and watching the professor-student relationship as well. Although we've seen that in other things, it was really interesting with just the juxtaposition of the prince going to Wales and going to this professor who feels like status-wise he's underneath the prince. And the way the relationship developed through the whole thing was really, really intriguing. And by the end, I will admit that I was kind of cheering on Charles as he gave his speech.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. And it made me feel a lot more empathy for the real guy. I mean, I've never been particularly a fan of him in life.
No.
And that made me go like there's some decency there.
He's been doing this his whole life. So he has that charm that even if someone insults me to my face, I'm going to smile and say something clever in return, but he's still polite. And I can't believe I actually feel bad a little for him. And, they made his girlfriend break up with him. That's not cool.
That was an interesting storyline unto itself.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. I don't have many good feelings about all that drama.
Right, which is why
Prince Charles is actually one of the less favourite royals throughout time, from the British people's perspective.
From
Obviously.
the American people's perspective.
From everyone's perspective.
We're in agreement there.
A lot of that here comes from the Diana incidents and the things that happened around Diana. He wasn't popular before Diana, and then the Diana thing happened, and so here I think that was where the unpopularity came from with him. In England, he already wasn't that popular. He gained some popularity once Diana was in the picture, and then with everything that happened and transpired there, it all went away very quickly.
And I think the casting of Josh O'Connor in that role,
He looks just like him.
is brilliant casting, because not only does he look an awful lot like Prince Charles,
He has the ears.
he's got the ears, absolutely. And I'm actually wondering whether like any of that was like, did they prosthetically like push them forward? I don't know, but they probably did. But he's so likable. There's a vulnerability to that actor that comes through in his smile, in every look that he has. You just kind of want to, I at least just kind of wanted to hug him. I just wanted to give this guy a hug so many times and go, it's going to be okay, buddy. You know, it's not, but you know, I want to tell you it's going to be okay. And of course, the juxtaposition of what he's going through, at least in the way this story is being told, and what happened with Prince Edward, right?
David.
Prince David, thank you. Prince David. And
It's both. It's King Edward, and then his name is David.
Right.
Thank you, David. And you know, choosing love over, you know, the monarchy, choosing that, and watching Charles going through something very similar, and then being reminded constantly that Queen Elizabeth was never able to make that choice, you know, and just being reminded that that Queen Elizabeth has had to give up everything that was really important to her personally to wear this crown and to do her duty, as these people around her are struggling with, to what degree are they going to do the same or not?
Well, and you have that selfishness of, he has this one particular line late in the season where he's talking about his mom and how his life won't be able to begin until she's gone. Mm-hmm. And having the perspective that we do in 2020 to know, dude, you're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah. How do you live in that shadow, right? That's a, you know, and the way that the monarchy is set up is that, yeah, you really are not important until, you know, yeah.
What did you guys think about the relationship between Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles in this series, in that episode?
I was surprised at how cold it was.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah.
Did you feel that was accurate to how it really is?
It was never seen publicly, as far as when we were growing up. It was never ever seen publicly, so it's hard to say whether that's just the writer's interpretation, or or actually real to life, whether their relationship is so frosty.
Do we know if the whatever pointed language was in the speech is a real thing?
I'm assuming the speech was taken word for word from the speech that he gave.
It's important to note that everything in this series, and that's across all 3 seasons, is scripted based upon biographies and news reports, including tabloid reports, of the royal family. Nobody has interviewed any member of the royal family specifically. They might be able to get archival stuff, and they have. That's how they've been able to replicate costumes and sets and things of that nature, but in terms
I'm fairly certain that all of the speeches are replicated word for word.
That was my next point, yeah.
And
also the budget they have, holy crap.
Oh my goodness. It's all on the screen. I mean, there's not a penny going to waste on this show. The only other show I've ever seen that this reminds me of, partially because it takes place in the same part of the world at a different time, is the show The Tudors. I felt very similarly about The Tudors from a production standpoint. Their lighting, sets, costumes, everything were second.
Listen to our podcast about The Tudors versus Wolf Hall. We have very differing opinions than you.
Oh my gosh, I just thought the Tudors was extraordinary production-wise,
We
but
spend a lot of money on the Tudors.
we need to talk more about that. I mean, but and I think The Crown even just takes it to a whole nother level. And I just want to know where they film all these. I want to know which things are sets and which things are real locations.
Most of it's a set, from what I understand.
It's incredible.
According to Peter Morgan, the first season of The Crown, the budget was $7 million per episode.
Holy moly.
That's amazing.
Let's get some Netflix money.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted
Aberfan episode.
Mhm.
I mean, just CGI alone.
Yeah.
That episode was heartbreaking.
It really
Yeah,
was.
just right out of the gate. It was amazing how they pulled that off. You felt that's CGI being done the way CGI needs to be done, which is you don't think of it as CGI until you think back on it and go, that must have been. How else would they have pulled that off?
They have done it.
It's
I mean,
incredible.
I had no idea. I had no idea what was coming. I know there's some really cute kids who are about to sing a song, and they're in school, and then suddenly everything is going to shit, and then they are like hiding under their desks, and that whole episode was like, the digging, and this is the first time I think we're mentioning Tony, and Tony went and took pictures. Yeah, we haven't spoke about Tony, have we?
Oh yeah,
I wanted to talk a little bit, unpack the Prince Charles episode a little bit more.
Oh, please.
Because there was just there was so much in it, and the reason why I asked about it was I had such mixed but strong reactions to it. Because I don't like Prince Charles. And I think that, not just because of Princess Diana, I have opinions. I feel
He's not a likable guy.
He's not a likable guy.
He's cold.
Yeah, he doesn't relate to the rest of the public as well as his siblings and or his children. So it's kind of hard to evoke sympathy for him. I really liked the storyline with the professor. I thought that was the strongest part. But
absolutely. That actually gave you an insight into him a lot more and how he maybe found himself. Actually even made me soften towards Charles a little.
Yes.
But yeah, I think when you look at everything that he went through in life, the school he was forced to go to at his father's discretion, which is actually why I found the coldness between him and Elizabeth so odd, was because a lot of the decisions that affected his life in a negative way came from his father.
Well, and it was also interesting that I'm curious how you felt about the depiction of Princess Anne, because she's stayed out of the limelight for most of her life by choice. And they have a very spicy depiction of her here, which may or may not be fact. I found her like 1,000 times more sympathetic in the moment than Prince Charles.
She seems to follow that trope
Yeah.
of the second, the second family member who isn't ever going to really be a royal, with the vast responsibilities. So she seems to go down that mirror of Margaret, but maybe not quite as harsh.
The Harry, the David, the Margaret.
Yes.
Well, but she seemed like she tries to do some good whenever it's put upon her of like, hey, you need to do royal things now. She tries to at least take a positive spin on it. And the shenanigans she got up to with
Andrew.
Well, no, I wasn't thinking about the shenanigans. I was thinking of the shenanigans with her grandmother and how they're kind of caper of sorts to get the reporter to pivot to Princess Alice. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I thought, and I'm glad you brought her up, because until we started talking about this, because I have not revisited season 3 of The Crown since I watched it basically as soon as it hit Netflix. That sucked up the next couple of days of my life, and I'm not at all unhappy about that. But I haven't had a chance to revisit it since then. And until you mentioned her, I'm like, I had forgotten about that part of it. And she is also one of my absolute high points of this season. That character and the actress that played her, Erin Doherty, I believe is her name. Mm-hmm. She was extraordinary to me, and a representation of a member of the royal family that I thought had this incredible strength to her without ever feeling a moment of compromise. And I thought that was a really interesting, because we get this strength from both of the actresses playing Queen Elizabeth, but it's almost so much of it is at the expense of her needs a lot of the time. And I felt like Erin's portrayal of Princess Anne, I never felt like she was ever sacrificing. Like she was, this is who I am, this is who I'm going to be, and you all are going to have to accept that. And there was a royalty to it to me.
And, she also brought us back to reality with David Bowie.
Yes.
Yes.
Key music choices, highly approved. But
Yeah.
it was...
Well, and I also really liked how there wasn't, like you said, she had that bit of royalness about her, but it wasn't with an attitude of, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. There's an authenticity to it.
There was a little tiny bit of American hippie in her in moments. And I thought that was really intriguing and interesting, and I don't feel like that was an accident at all on the actress's part or on the director's part in helping to even make that character connect a little bit more than even some of the other characters to an American audience in some ways.
And also, it's very clear nobody cares what she does because she's not, in line for the throne. So,
well, she is. She's just at the
conversation.
bottom.
Well, she is, but
she's like 11th.
The chances are slim.
Yes.
But there's that conversation between her and her brother where it's basically like, I'm not the golden child. No one's paying attention to me. So I'm getting away with whatever I want.
And contrary to Princess Margaret's take on that, which is, well, if you're not going to pay attention to me, I'm going to make you pay attention to me. Princess Anne was very much like, okay.
So I liked it when Charles and Anne were set up against each other. That was fun because you could consider the different perspectives of somebody who had to be on their way to the throne and somebody who wasn't, that didn't have the baggage of Elizabeth and Margaret, which is very, very public, and we all know it. We all know it at least superficially. So that was fun. But when it comes to the scandal part, whatever you said, Krista, earlier about they forced him to break up. I mean, yeah, that was part of it, but that wasn't all of it, because
No.
Camilla is, I don't like her either. So.
But I guess
it's a pretty popular opinion, Kylie.
I guess I'm just curious to see if they had let things play out naturally, if things would have ended up different. I mean, obviously that's like the butterfly effect, but
I don't think so, because I think Camilla was just, I don't think the way they told the story in The Crown, I'm not going to say that this wasn't real life. Maybe they were true love the whole time or whatever, but they did not sympathetically portray Charles or Camilla for me here any better than the press has. So.
And it's sad because I love Emerald Fennell as an actress.
She was great. She looked like her. She looks like Camilla, a young Camilla. But
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I'm just telling what I observed. Jeez.
Tell us how you really feel, Spencer.
No kidding.
Well, there's lots of jokes about Camilla in England, let's say. I think one of my least favorite things about any of the portrayals in The Crown, and this comes to scripting as opposed to the acting or personification on screen, is of the Queen Mother.
Yeah,
She, for me growing up, my memory of her is she was completely beloved by the British people, and the character portrayal that has been written for her so far, at least to date, which most of it does precede my birth, but she is really a very nasty character, and
especially
that is not and that is just not the perception I have of her from early memories of the 1975 and onwards. She was absolutely adored by the British people. So to see the character played this way, I don't know whether it just rubs me the wrong way or it just feels like it's an inaccurate portrayal.
Because the other scandal, the one about Princess Margaret and Roddy, when she calls her a whore, I believe, and it was just kind of, that isn't failing me, the actress who played her previously had a much softer approach that I felt very boisterous in a way that I wasn't vibing with this season.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, the perception of the Queen Mum was that she was feisty but generally sweet, right, Spencer?
Yes, yeah, very much so. She had an edge to her, but it wasn't a mean edge. It was more of a playful banter kind of a persona that we saw, as I said, from about 75 onwards. So I don't know whether this is just from biographical inside the palace type stuff or where it comes from. But yeah, it's hard to watch her character on screen.
Yeah, it feels like an extrapolation that I think is a bit salacious, actually.
I agree.
More just for the plot movement, for the sake of that.
We need more conflict, so here is a character we will do that with.
Right.
It's easy to do when that person's no longer around to compare them to and hasn't been for many years.
I will.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I might be remembering this wrong because, like I said, I didn't get a chance to revisit Crown season 3 immediately, or recently. But we haven't really seen that character in public, right? It's always been behind. It's always been in the house. It's always been with the other character, but we haven't seen that person in public at all. So I wonder how much of it too is, a combination of, okay, well, this character needs to, we're using that character to forward these other characters with these scenes that happen that we really have no idea if they happened this way or not.
Yeah.
Because it was just these two people. And so it's good. She's going to be relegated very much to a secondary character designed to just forward Queen Elizabeth's character and so forth.
Yeah.
Which they could have done. I was going to say they could have done that just with Lord Mountbatten, Dickie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, speaking of some baddies we need to talk about.
He's played by the guy who played Tywin Lannister on Game of Thrones. Thank you very much.
Charles Dance. As a step back, though, I mean, the Queen Mum's nickname in the public eye was the Smiling Duchess.
Mm-hmm.
What we've seen in this show does not give you that feel whatsoever.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
And I actually, moving on to Charles Dance as Mountbatten, I loved him. I thought he was fantastic. But I've always enjoyed Charles Dance, so...
I mean, okay, so Lord Mountbatten, the coup was so silly. And obviously...
Krista,
I actually rather liked that because at the beginning of the season, especially with Aberfan, it set up Elizabeth as being so disconnected and kind of like, I'm just the figurehead and all this is happening around me. And that got her, sort of pulled her back to reality and got her back in the mix of like, no, I'm in charge.
Though it was bittersweet to see her in the place that she probably should have been, in the barn with the horses.
Mm-hmm.
Just her whole posture and demeanor was relaxed and she was having fun and she was happy. And that was a little sad to see her have to leave that, but also, like Samantha was saying, her last meeting with Wilson when they're going to devalue the pound, and she's like, okay, cool, I'm going to go look at some horses, bye. It does bring her back.
I actually thought the coup itself was quite sensationalized. Wilson was not particularly popular with the Tories at the time, but I can't imagine it, but maybe I'm wrong. I haven't
It's real. It's super real.
Okay.
The coup was I read up on it after the episode because I had no knowledge of it.
Yeah.
And the episode makes it seem very black and white where it really wasn't. But there is some truth. It's just an over-dramatized depiction of the real event.
And the players are true. Like the guy from the Daily Mirror, who was also the chairman of the Bank of London.
Yes.
Though I did enjoy how the Queen kind of had to yell at Dickie, and that's just kind of fun. But
I enjoy whenever Charles Dance gets yelled at.
I don't want to jump away from talking about necessarily this season, but I want to make a prediction that I think would just be the most awesome thing ever. And I'm sure I'm not the first person on the planet to have considered this possibility. The way they're doing these seasons of The Crown, and that, it sounds like their goal is to continue this process of recasting the cast as they make leaps forward in the royal family. What's that?
They already have. They've already announced
5.
some of the cast.
For season 5.
Huh?
For season 5,
Yeah, so season 4 is going to continue Olivia and Tobias. Season 5, the one that I know for sure is Imelda Staunton, is going to be Queen Elizabeth II.
That I did.
Okay. Because I had a prediction, and if they go one more step forward ahead in time, and depending on when they do this, how awesome would it actually be to have Helen Mirren reprising her role from the movie The Queen, written by Peter Morgan, playing Queen Elizabeth in The Crown? I think that would be just fantastic.
It would be epic, but unfortunately, it's already been cast.
Yeah, so they're not going to go any further. Yeah, they're not going to go any further than that. They can age her up a little if they need to with continuing the process. So
Helen Mirren also played the Queen in the Audience by Peter Morgan. So
she did.
Yeah,
that's prior to when we saw it, though. We saw Kristen Scott Thomas, who was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Nice.
Helen Mirren, at the point we had seen it, had come to do it on Broadway.
Okay,
so she'd come over.
But Imelda Staunton, she'll be amazing.
Oh, she's fantastic. I had not heard that, and now that I hear it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can't wait. I'm ready. Bring it, just give it to me now. I'll take it in
now.
Posture and the whole thing, I can totally see that as a natural next step after Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
Except we'll be going from Bellatrix Lestrange to Professor Umbridge, but that's okay. It'll be fine.
So, are there any other plot points we want to discuss? Tony and Margaret. Is it anyone?
That felt like it was the most dramatized aspect of the show. I mean, they did have a very rocky relationship. There's no doubt about that. But that whole thing felt very, very dramatized. And I believe it was probably somewhat more amicable, as they both had significant others beyond themselves by that point.
Longer. It was, I mean, she was with Roddy for 8 years.
Yes, she was. And they made it seem like it was 8 weeks.
Correct. So, the whole thing just was really crunched to make it much more dramatic. Because I don't really think either of them particularly cared by the end.
It's so interesting to me how much the relationships in this show, largely because of circumstance, are driven by ego, are driven by this feeling of not being able to amount to enough or feeling like less than because of who you're with. And of course, that's what it's going to be like if you're coming into a royal family in any way. And I think that's a wonderful, larger than life way to process how I think a lot of people feel in everyday relationships. Especially, unfortunately, men who, through society up until this point, and I hope that this is changing and starting to evolve so that it's not so much the case that, men's lives were oftentimes, they were defined by what they do. What is your job? What is your status? That is your sense of power. And the men in The Crown are consistently being reminded of how they are below the women that they are with in stature, in position, and so forth, and how that's impacting them and their fragile male egos, and the different degrees to which these characters are struggling with that. And I think that's another one of those things that Peter Morgan has brought, that he's showcased in this series, that allows a lot of people, I think, to be able to relate to these characters in ways they might not even want to admit sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That actually kind of segues into one of your questions, Krista, at the bottom. Do you want to go straight to that?
Which one?
The one about he loves to tell male stories.
Ah, yes, that one. Peter Morgan, he loves to tell stories about men. And in a story that is about a woman, we did get a lot of Philip and Dickie and Charles this season. How do we feel about that? I thought it was a little heavy-handed, especially with Philip. I thought we got a lot of Philip and not enough Elizabeth for me.
I agree. I thought that her presence was lacking. She was there, but it was almost like she was a prop in several episodes of just watching what was happening.
I guess I didn't notice that because I enjoyed Philip's character so much.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it too, is that it's hard for me. I can see that, and it's interesting that I didn't feel it watching it this season. I didn't feel that it was weighted more on the male characters' sides while I was watching it. And I do feel that I tend to be more aware as a male than most when women are not, their stories aren't being told quite to the degree that the men, and I don't feel like I noticed it as much, but that might largely be because of how enamored I was with how Tobias was playing Philip, that I was just happy every moment that his story was being told. But now that you're mentioning it, I can totally see how it could be looked at that way.
I agree with Samantha a little bit because I know. I love Prince Philip's. I love Tobias Menzies. He is such a vast improvement to Matt Smith for me, and I agree that he was wonderful. I actually started to feel the tip of, well, why are we focusing on this person and not the Queen during the Prince Charles episode? That's another thing that I wanted to unpack, because I was like, why are we spending time with Charles when this is really kind of her story? I mean, it will become more important, and maybe they're laying groundwork because obviously the next season's going to hit Diana, but it just feels, that's when I started to feel like, well, maybe 10 episodes might be too many. But that's, no offense.
And that is an interesting point, though, because this is one of the few series that I've seen recently where I did not personally feel like I don't feel like there's any filler episodes in The Crown to me. I feel like every episode, when the 50 to 60 or so minutes have gone by, almost every episode I look at my watch and go, crap, it's done already? And I so rarely feel that with a TV show. This one, every episode I just find to be such beautiful additional layers to whatever character they have chosen to focus on for that episode.
I thought Bobbykins and the coup could have been one episode.
Interesting.
I agree.
I think part of the reason it feels that way as well is because it isn't a formulaic procedural. It's very much, even if you know the story, you're not sure where they're going to finish it. I really do hope that season 4 kicks off right after where season 3 ends. Season 3 ends in 1977, which would have been the Silver Jubilee, which was a massive event. I mean, every city in the country, we had massive street parties, tables down, the street I lived on was 1.5 miles long, and tables everyone brought a table out, brought food out, and there were flags, and it was a massive national party. You won't ever see anything like that again because society has changed so dramatically. Mm-hmm. It was one of those events where no matter how you felt about your neighbors, you were one community. And there's a lot of events coming up very shortly after that, which I don't want to give anything away from the, knowing of the historical things, but there's some pretty major events that happen. One of the biggest is in 1979. So I'm hoping they don't skip forward straight to Diana. Well, you've got Thatcher, but there's also stuff with some of the characters that we've already seen. And my fear is that they'll skip some of that stuff. I'm also a little concerned about Gillian Anderson playing Thatcher, and also knowing how this particular author, playwright, screenwriter feels about Thatcher, that we won't get a very honest depiction.
I'm not concerned. Gillian Anderson is phenomenal. Now, I might be biased because I love the X-Files, but she's good at
She's
everything.
A great actress. I don't doubt that. I'm just not sure I see her as Thatcher.
I'm concerned I'm going to typecast her, have the Helena Bonham Carter effect. Hopefully not, but
I think she's going to be less Helena Bonham Carter effect, because Helena Bonham Carter is larger than life and follows Tim Burton everywhere, whereas Gillian Anderson deliberately picks things that go against her type in every new project.
Right. Yeah, if you have not seen Sex Education on Netflix, Gillian Anderson is so much fun to watch and so off type for her.
Also, her portrayal in American Gods. I'm not going to tell you who she's playing. I just think you should watch it.
Spencer, truly, I don't know the answer to this question. In the UK, what is Thatcher's legacy?
It depends on the prism that you look at it through, I should say. Because from today's perspective, a very divisive character. But from an international leader perspective, the strength, especially as a woman that she showed, should be admired by every woman who's gone on or wanted to go on to be anything. She would truly be a trailblazer if you look at her outside of her politics.
I just didn't know. I mean, I know enough about her as a person but I guess I just didn't know how she was viewed at home.
Yeah, it very much depends on what side of the political spectrum you're on as to how you view
She
her,
was
because of some of the
conservative,
things that she did. Oh yeah, very.
She got on well with Reagan
she didn't
and
mince her
Gorbachev.
words, and she definitely didn't let the male establishment push her around at all.
She had really good relationships with Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev, but she didn't take anything they said lying down.
No, if she made a decision, it was made.
All right.
I mean, one of
I
the
will do a lot of
historical
research about her before our next podcast.
that would, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing. One of the things that so the Falklands War, which happened in '82, the historical record says that the Argentinians wanted to surrender. We had intelligence where their naval flagship was. And she said that to set an example to other countries that may think that we are weak, we will destroy the ship that is the flagship of the Argentine Navy before we accept their surrender.
Whoa.
So she was a very strong woman.
I don't love that, but what are you going to do?
That reminds me of the Khaleesi in Game of Thrones, but I already made one reference to that today. I'm baiting Spencer to say musical chairs.
No, I've been referencing Game of Thrones. I know enough about it.
Oh, good.
I'm just not going to watch it, especially after I hear how terrible the final season was.
All right, Krista,
History
you
will
had
tell.
something you were going to say, another plot point you wanted to mention?
Oh, goodness. I have to remember what it was. Oh, I wanted to bring up the American visit earlier on with Margaret and Tony and get your thoughts on that.
That was fun. That was just a fun piece of television.
It was very interesting to see her and how she understood what was needed and to play the situation and to get that victory that was very much needed for the country. She really did believe that she should be a statesperson and a servant to the country. And given that opportunity, she did not waste it.
Clancy.
Oh, this was
his
very
name is.
much her living out that dream of what it would have been like to be queen, and taking that moment and I loved the way it was played. And it was my favorite episode of Helena's in the season by far, largely because it was in those moments of stillness, those moments when we knew that she as a character was aware that no one was watching her. You could see moments of the ego, the pride, all of that coming through and going, this is what I should be doing every single day of my life.
I like the juxtaposition of the story being told by Mr. Wilson and it being told, and then we would just see the little flashes, and it was every time the queen is like white knuckling the chair, like, what? Oh God. What has happened now? Mm-hmm. And I really just liked that play of, instead of just it being a straightforward linear, of getting their reaction almost in real time.
I thought
and it being played from the American perspective a bit too, and portraying Johnson as like the Margaret of America, basically, in comparison to Kennedy, is how I
played
took
by
it.
Clancy. What's his name? Last name Clancy. He's one of those guys that's in everything. He was in the Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah, and he always plays a kind of rednecky, badass American dude. He's on Billions.
Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown.
According to the internet.
When they didn't show Lyndon Johnson's face right away, and there was just a lot of rear shots of the back of his head and him talking, I was like, that's that Clancy guy.
Oh yeah, you knew it immediately. Yeah, he's one of the few actors you can recognize him from the back of his head.
Yep.
Now that is presence.
I thought he was more believable than the guy who or the Dexter dude, Michael C. Hall playing Kennedy. I believe Clancy more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found Michael C. Hall as Kennedy to just be an odd casting choice.
Well, and he didn't get to do much. I think they realized, well, all right, we've seen Kennedy a million times and a million different things. We don't really need to showcase him a lot here. But yeah, all I could keep thinking is, what dark passenger did JFK have? That's
right. It's his clean room.
Right, exactly.
I think you're making a Dexter reference, aren't you?
We are making Dexter references, yes.
I'll be putting you on the list.
Oh, absolutely. I would talk about Dexter. John Lithgow in that is one of the best characters on TV ever.
Me too.
We can do just the John Lithgow series.
Yeah, or we could just talk about seasons 1 through 4 of Dexter and then just stop like the show should have.
That's what everybody says.
Yeah. Mhm.
Not discuss the ending. All right. As we start to think about wrapping up, I have a couple questions I'd like to pose each of you, which is, how would you rate this season against the others? And are you going to keep watching?
I like this season the best so far. I don't
Yeah.
know why, but I think it's because of Olivia and Tobias. And yes, I'm going to keep watching. If for no other reason than I produced this. But no, I'm enjoying watching. So.
This has surprised me as my favorite season. It didn't have the shine and sparkle of the first one to me, but story-wise and performance-wise, I was so enthralled by every moment, and I will absolutely keep watching and keep rationing so that it lasts longer.
Very British of you.
I would also say that this was the best season. Some of it may be contextual because it's closer to my actual life timeline. So I already had knowledge of a lot of the stuff in season 3, whereas season 1 and 2 were more of a historical background for me. And yeah, I will keep watching, and I hope they bring this right up to present day when they sign off. Obviously, I don't
They're
want them
doing
to
5
try and
seasons,
forecast
right?
the future. Yeah, I think it's 5 seasons, and hopefully it comes right up to today. And I hope the Queen's still around by the time they finish it.
It'll be fun to see who they cast as, William and Harry.
Yeah,
And Meghan and Catherine for them.
and Harry's dad. Oops.
I will say that I think I like all 3 seasons equally for very different reasons. I
Star
miss
Trek
Vanessa
answer.
Kirby's energy as Margaret, but I love Tobias's energy as Philip. This had my favorite episode of all of them, but for very personal reasons to me in Moondust. So will I keep watching? Nah, I give up. This show just is not very good. Yes, I will keep watching. And what this conversation today has solidified for me personally is that I think the star of this show is truly Peter Morgan as the writer. I think that is the lifeblood of this show. Being able to recast an entire show and love this season as much, or for many of you more than even the other seasons, is a testament to what Peter Morgan and the team behind the camera, as well as the actors in front of the camera, have created.
Well, like Todd, I am conflicted on whether or not this season is my favorite over the others. So I think I'd vote for like them all equally. It just feels like such an apples and oranges comparison with the different casts. I don't know that I can pick one over the other. And yes, I will indeed keep watching.
Wonderful. So did everyone actually go this time?
Yes. Everybody answered
Okay,
the
so
questions.
I can talk. Okay. I am the moderator of this panel, so I will indeed be watching. It is my job, partially. Also, I love it. So there's that. I'm really torn because I love those initial episodes with Jared Harris, like, a lot. But I also really enjoy some of those Vanessa Kirby manic Margaret moments. That being said, as a whole, I think season 3 is my favorite, like, as a complete series. But my favorite episodes are from before, if that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Are there any last little comments anyone would like to make?
Can't wait for
I
season
think
4.
I'm just excited for season 4. I wouldn't ask for any predictions because
Just please don't take so long to bring us season 4. Get us season 4 sooner. I want it now. It's coming out soon, isn't
I
it?
predict the Queen will
please
still
hurry.
be the Queen.
Wait, have they filmed it already, or did they have a quarantine?
I believe they've filmed it already. I
I
think.
sure hope so.
it's currently in production and no release date has been set.
Ah, shoot.
But
I was
that's
hoping that they kind of filmed it back to back with season 3 and they were just in post, but maybe that's not the case.
it's pretty typical for this show timeline wise to release at the end of the year. I don't know if they're
It
still
was November
filming.
last time.
Yeah, there was November. I don't know if they're still filming, and if they are still filming, they would be shut down because all Netflix is shut down right now.
Right.
Whole world is. So,
Well,
and on
at
that
least
cheery note, thank you all for joining us.
According to the Radio Times, which is Britain's TV guide, there is no firm release date at all, and the article was posted on Thursday of last week. So,
Oh, wow.
Well,
Womp womp.
So-
Well, but I will say they can take as long as they need to take. I will wait 5 years if I have to, if it means we're going to get an amazing season 4 of The Crown. So take your time, make it great.
Oh, don't give them that much time, Todd.
7 million per episode.
Because I know Peter Morgan is listening to this podcast. Peter, I didn't mean that. Please, no, get it to us quickly. I want it now.
Peter, if you're listening, tweet at us at CPU Podcast. We'd love to talk to you. That's Sarah's job.
Guest panelist.
2 points of interest.
Any actors from the show. We will take any crew members. We will take literally anyone.
2 points of interest from the Radio Times article. Shooting actually did conclude in mid-March, apart from any pickups. And they are predicting November, December of 2020 for the release date.
Awesome.
Yay. All right.
That's a much cheerier note, wouldn't you agree, Krista?
It is a cheerier note.
Yes. Let's end before Spencer ruins it.
Well, on that cheery note, what I'd like to do is thank Samantha, Todd, Kristen, Spencer, and of course, Krista for moderating the Crown panel. And because we've royally had this royal discussion, it's now time to royally roll the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kelsey Rezmer. Kelsey played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole kit and caboodle was engineered and produced by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give us stars, give us comments, give us reviews. Let us know how we're doing. Send us a message. We might just read it on the podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we should keep, what we should toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where we have a guest book, via email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via our social media, Facebook, Twitter at CPU Podcast, and Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We always have several more new episodes coming down the pike. Just listen to our intros. And if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, just find us. We are everywhere and searchable wherever you look for things on the internet. You can search for us, or you can subscribe at our website, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on our new events and episodes. Until the next time, all available seasons of The Crown are available to stream on Netflix, as that's the network who made it. In the meantime, our Crown panel will next reconvene following the release of the 4th season, the date of which, as we have discussed, has not yet been announced, though it is expected to drop near the end of 2020. As always, keep a weathered eye to CPU for all of the details. In the meantime, and until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned.
Goodbye.